Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to our Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Campus Center co-curricular series. This is the third installment of our Tuesday series. And so if this is your first time watching us, welcome. We've had a great time with our initial conversations. Our first one with Pastor Daniel Duffus, our second one last week with Larry and Sandy Feldman. And today, I'm really excited about the guest that we have with us for today, and I'll get to introducing him in a moment. But first of all, again, welcome. Glad that you're here. Let us know here in the comments where you're watching from. We're really excited to have you. We'd also ask that you share this video with others, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. We're streaming live in both those places, and share this video with the hashtag TRHT AU. That's TRHT AU. There's a couple of different things that I wanted to just share with you by way of announcements as we're getting started here. First of all, as a reminder, once again, a happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I wanted to remind you, as I often do, that if you're interested in finding out what our Hispanic Heritage Month plans are for the month, you can go right here. As a matter of fact, I'll take you through it. You go to our Andrews University homepage, and right here is one of our featured homepage items is our 2020 Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. Of course, the theme for this month is Unidos, and we have a great slate of activities and things of that nature for you to join in with. So make sure that you do that. I'll also just point out that you may have received in your email a note from me on civility and political speech here at Andrews. And this is helping us provide some guidelines for conversations around politics and the political season that we're in. We're excited for you to engage with that as you're motivated. But we do want to make sure we're doing that through the framework of civility, respect, and love. So please feel free to check that out. And I'm really, really excited to remind you, as we talked about last week, that our voting guide, our voter guide for students, 2020 student voter guide, is live on our website. You go to andrews.edu/go/vote, and you'll get all the information you need on voting week. It'll happen October 5 through 9. We're going to have volunteers on our campus from the Berrien and Cass County League of Women Voters on our campus to register students, employees. If you're on campus and you want to, let's say if you want to make sure that you're registered, you want to figure out what you have to do to get registered to vote here in Michigan, we'll have all that information here for you. There's some good information on our site right now, which can help you prepare for voting week. So we're talking about voter eligibility, also talking about checking if you're registered to vote, where you should vote, some frequently asked questions. And then we're also going to work with you on making a plan to vote. So if you're voting here in Michigan, if you have an absentee ballot to vote elsewhere, if you choose to do that, or even for our international students or non-citizen students who can't vote, we have really tangible ways that you can get involved as well, because we want everybody to be included in this powerful moment. And again, as I mentioned, there's student vote week, student voter registration, but of course our employees, you're welcome to register as well. We encourage you to fill out your application now. You can start filling that application out now. You can pick up the application at the Student Life office. So if you fill out the paperwork in advance, when you come October 5 through 9, we'll make sure you get set up with postage or whatever else you may need to make sure that you're registered. We'll take care of that for you. But if you come in person, prior to the week, right now, you can go to the Student Life office, get that registration, fill it out, and then we'll help you to get everything submitted. And then lastly, we have some good guides here around helping to make sure that you're an informed voter, because we don't want you to take this opportunity that you have to vote lightly. And so we provided some good resources there for you to check out. And really the important thing here is to engage in conversation and to really engage with what's on your ballot, understand what's on the ballot, understand who's running, how do they align with what's important to you and your convictions and what you see as really critical to why you're casting your vote, and then move accordingly. So really excited about that. Again, go to andrews.edu/go/vote for all information on our voting week and to make sure you have your voting plans solidified. And so without further ado, at this point, it's my privilege to introduce, well, I'm really going to have him introduce himself, but to have a person I consider a friend, a scholar, a pastor, theologian, Pastor Manny Arteaga, and I'm going to bring him into our conversation now. Pastor, how are you, sir?
Hey, brother. How's it going, man? Good to see you, Mike.
I'm hanging in there. Can't complain if I wanted to. But good to have you with us. And so we're grateful to have you engage in this conversation. And so as we're really getting started here, before we dive into more of the meat of what we wanted to talk about, I'd love it if you would just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, some of your background, what you're doing, professionally now, some of your passions and things of that nature.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for the opportunity.
Sure.
Bring me in. It's an honor. It's an honor to be able to share today. My name is Manny Arteaga. Most people call me Manny. My name is Manuel. Small town kid from northern Mexico, Montemorelos, Nuevo León, Mexico. Born and raised up there, and I've been here in California now for 25 years this month. And I became a Southern California boy. I got to school here, and I'm pastoring here in LA County in a church that we planted about 5.5 years ago called Kalēo. Kalēo is a Greek name, but we're not a Greek congregation. We're actually a fairly profound congregation. We are predominantly Spanglish in our approach to do ministry. There's a lot of, interracial marriages, but for the most part, the basis is Latinx community here in LA County. And yeah, man, I've had the blessing of serving there. This year looks different, obviously. We're not in the same building, but we remain in community throughout the year.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah. And that's great. Thanks for sharing. And, I'm actually remembering now, I believe it was last year during Hispanic Heritage Month, we had you on our campus to speak and to share for Lighthouse Vespers, which is our United Vespers here on campus. And then you helped us launch a sort of a Spanglish worship initiative. So right. I like the fact that you use that Spanglish terminology for your church plant called Vertical here on our campus. And that was a really powerful moment. And it was a really great start to something that, our brown students in particular were really crying out for, was a space to really, I'm a little Spanish, I'm a little English, it's a little in between. It's not maybe all figured out, but I just want a space to be me, know? Right. And you provided a context for us that was so beautiful in the midst of that. And so with that being said, I know we're in just such and there's so many conversations during this time. It's kind of like you already know the question that I'm getting ready to ask with the COVID-19 pandemic shifting everything. And chief among those things, ministry in the local church context for sure. How has that shift been going for you at your church? What does ministry for you really look like during this moment in time? And how are you all trying to embrace this moment in spite of some of the difficulties and uncertainty?
Sure. If I can be candid, as a pastor who thought was an introvert, and I would do well in isolation. This year actually challenged me quite a bit. I found myself in an identity crisis. I missed people. I miss being around, the masses, the crowds and everything. So on a personal level, it was really challenging.
Yeah.
To find joy in ministry in front of a camera, right? Find joy in ministry in my office with no one to really connect. So that was really difficult. But, one of the things that we've been pushing in our church is reminding people that the church it's not a place you go to, but a family you belong to, right? And just like COVID-19 has not canceled our familial relationships, right, with our tias, our abuelitas, right, our family, it doesn't have to cancel the church either. So we've been Zoom groups, our life groups have gone on Zoom, and we have a fairly good thing going on here. It's been ongoing throughout the year, and we remain connected through the week, and we just come together and celebrate on Sabbath. So there's been challenges, but we've been able to stay afloat and still stay excited about some stuff.
No, that's good, man, because I think it's really hard in this season to really stay connected. I mean, I think that's a big thing, obviously, and to be able to continue to. I know that oftentimes, in the church context, you're often, building upon, you sort of project out, and we have this plan for, all right. And particularly since you're in a situation where you planted a church, I know that you had, I'm sure, strategic planning and visioning around, okay, in year fill in the blank, we're going to do this, and that, and it should look like this. And, we
were trying to get a building this year. Right?
See, so there you go. And so that's really interesting, because I'm sure now what you've wrestled through is you've rightfully so been thinking about, okay, we need to find a home, a good space for our ministry to grow and to flourish. But now having these conversations and questions around, well, what does it mean to be the church outside of the building? And in many ways, you've already sort of been doing that by, I guess, renting a space.
Right.
But when you've started to, I guess, build things up to, all right, we're going to acquire this building, which is needed, particularly in sort of a pre-COVID reality, how has that maybe shifted how you're projecting out things forward? Is it more like, all right, well, maybe things are just kind of on pause and we'll do something different for now? Or is this going to be a more ingrained shift in the culture of your ministry going forward?
Honestly, and this is what I told my leaders, I think 2020 is about identifying some idols that we have in our church, right? Identifying some stuff, some sacred cows that really have taken center stage, when in reality they should remain on the fringes of our conversations. And for years, we've been talking about the building, and that kind of became this ideal, this idol that we had, and it in many ways made us freeze a lot of things that we could have been doing because our focus was the building. And just like that, there's many other things, just even programming. A lot of times we make out of programming, we make an idol. So it's one of those things where we know that coming out of 2020, or however long this lasts, because we swear it on December 31st, right?
Yeah.
However long this lasts.
Yeah.
There's some stuff. I use the analogy of the Exodus, of the crossing of the sea. There's, the stuff that belonged to God made it out of the water, right? That didn't stay in the water. Well, we're in the water right now, and we are hoping that only that which is God's comes out of this thing. The rest of it needs to stay. Wow. Yeah.
Well, man, you got my mind spinning now. I want to just let you preach on that a little bit. That sounds good. But but that definitely is a plug for. I think the beautiful thing about the virtual space is that, and I've been able to do this a couple different times, is you all are virtual now. So wherever you're at, if you all want to tap in, with Pastor Arteaga and his ministry, you can do so and get some of this powerful content, because it's beautiful. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about in regards to just some different things you are doing as far as reimagining and rethinking what it means to do ministry. And I want to make sure that I pronounce this correctly. I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I pulled it up, and maybe tell us a little bit about this and what it's all about. And I see the description there, the intersection of amigos, tacos, and theology. You had me at tacos. I stopped reading after that. And we're not talking about Taco Bell tacos. We're talking about
that's
authentic. That's an abomination. We're talking about authentic, real tacos. Bless the Lord. But tell us a little bit about this.
All right. So here's the thing. I have a network of friends, of pastors here who serve at the same under the Hispanic work here at the same conference, and we've been doing ministry for a minute. And you know, we always remain in community. We do stuff for young adults locally. But we realized that this year, I mean, everything kind of went dormant, and many of us were losing that spark when it came to ministry. So we decided to just on a regular basis meet on Tuesday nights, have tacos, and hang out. So we were just, you know, as friends, we were just talking. And if you can scroll all the way down, you're going to see a shot of us eating in the back of a truck. That was our scene. At the very bottom, you see us eating at the, you know, in the trunk of a pickup truck at a taco spot in LA. And we're like, you know, we've had some really good conversations here, right? We've had some amazing conversations. What if we were to bring people around the table? We bring them to the taco space. We record some of these conversations, and we create some online content where we're talking theology as friends. So that's in the works right now. We're hoping to release it hopefully at the end of this year or early next year, a few episodes of that conversation. But this also led to this idea of pop-ups. So last week, actually, this is going to be airing a little later, but this a few days ago, we had our first pop-up where we handpicked 35 people that we thought would be a good conversation partners, and we met in the backyard, and it became our first Tacology pop-up, and it was amazing to just do community and eat our favorite meal because, I mean, it's tacos, bro. Tacos, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And talk about God in a way that addresses some of the needs of our community, right? So we really are. A friend of mine, Marquise, actually gave me language, reminded me of the language of James Cone. When James Cone speaks of his own Black liberation theology, he calls it the teaching people how to be both authentically Black and authentically Christian. This is kind of the space where we want to teach people how to be authentically brown and authentically Christian, right? And highlight the intersection of culture and theology.
Yeah, that's beautiful, bro. And I saw the page a few days ago. I hadn't even seen you all posted this Brown Voices for Black Lives. I mean, I had to pause. It's just beautiful, and it's moving to even just see that, bro. And I immediately, of course, you know, just this past week, of course, it's still on our minds, the news that Breonna Taylor's murderers will not be charged with any charges in connection with her death. And so, as we've seen, there's been so much now in the wake of that, you know, of people raising their voices and speaking out and saying that, no, this isn't right. And so to see that solidarity, I think is really beautiful, because what I've learned as well is that whether it's the Breonna Taylor issue or the continued human rights violations that are happening at our southern border, which there's this idea in a lot of people's minds that that's a thing that happened. No, that's a thing that's happening continually, currently. And the more that we can build these connections and bridges, I think, particularly in our church context, gives us the capacity to do, I think, some really powerful and beautiful things. So that's just beautiful to see, for sure.
Man, bro, and honestly, I don't think there's a better time than now. There's no time than now when everyone's attention is on this, right? One of the genius of dominant culture is the fact that it creates a wedge between people groups that are suffering, and solidarity is a must, and it's biblical. It's biblical.
Absolutely.
we're supposed to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. So it's a biblical concept that now more than ever can be practiced in a very beautiful and powerful way.
Definitely, bro. Great. Well, that's beautiful. Whenever maybe 5 years from now when COVID's behind us, hopefully it's sooner than that, I'll slide out there to LA and, I have to catch a game of your beloved LAFC. That's something that we've already talked about. And we'll grab some tacos and break bread. I'm looking forward to being able to do that for sure.
Break tortilla, bro.
Break tortilla, absolutely. That was a figure of speech, but you're absolutely right. Definitely. So yeah, man. But that sounds really cool. I want to transition us a little bit for those who were tuned into our first episode with Pastor Daniel Duffus. We talked a bit more in depth about this powerful book, Brown Church, written by Dr. Robert Chow Romero. Really, really great work. And Pastor Duffus helped us dive in a bit more into some of the concepts that Dr. Romero breaks down in regards to this legacy. And he looks at 5 centuries of Latinx social justice theology and identity, and just the rich history that's there. And I'm sure for you yourself, just as a member of the Brown Church and the broad, diverse, eclectic collection of people that is, I'm sure it was extremely motivating and empowering for you. And so with that sort of backdrop, because I know this is a book that you've done some deep study in as well, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the Brown Adventist Church and what it looks like. And so I guess, I have lots of questions, and so I could, ask a lot. Yeah, I know you probably do as well. So, with your understanding and of you, obviously as an Adventist pastor, and knowing that context and knowing, in depth the context that Dr. Romero is presenting of this legacy of the Brown Church, what intersections do you see, I guess, between this broader Brown Church group that Romero is describing and the particular Brown Adventist Church? Are there intersections? And if so, what do they look like? If not, why are there not those intersections? And maybe just kind of break that down for us a little bit.
Sure. Well, let me tell you, when I read that book, the final stretch of the book, I couldn't even read. I was just in tears. I was in tears because even though I have been a part of the Brown Church in one way or another my entire life, it wasn't until that moment that I found a home. Right? I found myself at home. Why? Because even though I have attended congregations that are filled with Latino and Latina people, brownness, as defined by Romero, is not necessarily a color. It's a posture, right? It's an identity. And it's an identity. The Brown Church is not necessarily the Latino church. The Brown Church encompasses the Latino church, but it's the Latino church that is willing to stand up against empire, that is willing to stand up against oppression, right? So I found myself weeping because I finally, 13 years into ministry, at the age of almost 38 at the time, I found myself amongst friends and family, right, for the first time. And I know Dr. Romero well. We worked together in Matthew 25, and I'm just so grateful for this piece. And I think anyone, and I love the fact that you've picked it up. Claudia Allen has as well. I've seen her teaching it out there. This book is for everyone because again, Brown is not necessarily just Mexican or Salvadorian or Dominican. It's really broad and really beautiful. As far as the legacy and how that intersects with the Adventist Church, with the Brown Adventist Church, I'm trying to identify if there's an intersection, right? I'm trying to identify if we really. Here's the thing: as an Adventist pastor who has done undergrad and my master's and is now doing post-grad work, I am now learning about my legacy, right? And granted, I am not one to only read denominational books. I read widely. right? I've read Elizondo and Villafane and Justo Gonzalez. I've read Elizabeth Conde Fraser. I've read these, but it's not until now when I'm piecing all these things and I'm like, yo, I'm a part of an amazing legacy, and my Adventist tribe knows nothing about it.
Yeah.
Right? I can count in one hand the people that can even engage in this conversation. Most of us are still in the posture of learning. Wow, there is a legacy, right? Before 1844, or whatever, no, actually before what, it was like, I think 1890s or something, that the first Adventists start moving, and appearing in North America.
Right.
There is a history before that, and there is a Protestant movement before this. So I see a huge disconnect between the legacy that has been there and a community that has nothing, that has no clue that legacy exists. So I think for those of us who are now becoming familiar with this, we need to be the bridge, right?
Yeah.
We need we need to connect people. And part of what I'm doing right now, even with my own friends and colleagues, read this piece, look at this history.
Yeah.
Like, think about it so we're talking about Brown Adventism. Let's break that down for a little bit. As a Brown church, the Brown church in 1511, I'm sure the pastor broke that down a couple weeks ago when he shared. In 1511, the Brown church protested the crown and the papacy. In 1511 in Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
Mike, the Protestant Reformation does not begin until 1517.
Wow.
Right? So that means that the Brown church was protesting before Luther.
Yeah.
Right? The Brown church was already in motion before Luther.
Yeah.
I mean, we were a movement before what we recognize, the Eurocentric Protestant Reformation. There was already something in the works that is highlighted, and that's our legacy, right? Montesinos in 1511 preached this fiery sermon where he put his neck on the line, pushing back against the crown and the papal throne. So that's part of our cultural heritage. But then there's also the denominational one. Adventists were abolitionists, right? Early Adventists were very socially minded. They were involved in the Underground Railroad. We know that. Look, if there is a denomination that is known for its subversion, it's Adventism.
Yeah.
Like we are the Protestants of Protestantism, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's in our posture to be subversive. So as a Brown church, we are subversive. As Adventists, we are subversive. It's in our DNA, and we haven't known about it, right? It's in our legacy, and we don't know about it. If we can only, capture the imagination of our new generation. Hey, this is who you are. Not this is what you become, what you can become. This is who you actually are. This is your DNA. It's in your genetics as a church. Imagine, the kind of prophetic movement that we can actually become. So I think that connection.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful start. That's beautiful, bro. And I think you've sort of hit on some of the cognitive dissonance that I even had as I was starting to work through the book, because one of the things I had a similar experience to what you're talking about. Probably about, it was maybe just about like 6 or so years ago, where I don't even know what prompted it. I just started some independent research into, Black Adventist history. And, of course, my dad being a minister, you've heard some like key names and some key, landmarks within the story. And, you hear some of these things. But it wasn't until, for whatever reason, I just started diving deeper into some of the nitty gritty of what the story really looks like, that I started to understand. And there was a part of me that really started to get furious, because it was like, why aren't we talking? Like, why haven't I known this? Why aren't we talking about this in our pulpits? Why isn't this a part of our narrative? Why aren't we sharing this information? And which I think for a lot of, young Adventists would be empowering and insightful to understand, to your point, some of how, because you kind of grow up with this negative viewpoint of some of the pioneers in our church, because you just you hear these weird Ellen White quotes and all this different stuff, and you just perceive these people as lunatics. And then you really start to understand how some of what they stood for intersects with your heritage in this church. And you have this reawakening, but you kind of are like, all right, well, where do I go to do, like, where do I get more? Or like, who do I, my biggest thing was, I don't know who to talk to about this. Like, right. I don't see the conversation happening anywhere else. And so I guess the question starts to become, how do we, as you're starting to articulate it there within, our Adventist context, how do we start to make more space for these non-dominant narratives that we're talking about, this legacy, and how do we identify even, to the extent that there are any intersection points between that, that brown church legacy that you so eloquently described for us and our heritage, because it's possible that there are some. Because for me, like, for example, I didn't really see any connections between Adventism and the civil rights movement. I always saw those things as separate until I started digging into some people's memoirs and seeing not just how they were protesting alongside King, but also the racism within our church. And it's like, well, why aren't we championing and talking about this? How do we create an environment where our youth in particular are able to be empowered and inspired by the truth, and allowing that truth actually to set them free to go off and do whatever it is that God's calling them to do? So
the key word there is truth, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a paradigm shift. In our first and only Techology pop-up that we had a few days ago, we engaged some thorny topics, right? About living in the hyphen, and what does it mean to be in two worlds at the same time? This idea of liminality that actually Romero gets into.
Right.
And we engaged the topic of justice, and I mean we got into those waters, and a lot of these people were like, wait, are we allowed to talk about this? So not only do we not know how to talk about it, we don't even know if we're allowed to talk about it. So along the way, we have been taught that here's the gospel and here is justice, right? And there is no connection. There's no relationship one way or the other. And the truth is that when you look at scripture and you remove your Western lenses and you look at words like righteousness and how heavy it is on the word right, we see that justice is central to the conversation. So we don't know how to talk about it. We don't even know if we're allowed to talk about it. So part of what I want to do, and this is something I'm working with also my network, my circle, is we gotta teach people differently.
Yeah.
Right? We have to, and I'm going to use a word. I know it's loaded, but we need to decolonize our theology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Decolonize our theology.
Absolutely.
One of the things that Techology really seeks to do is what we call teología en conjunto, theology in community.
Yeah.
Our Western understanding of theology is, here comes the professor with the degrees, and he goes, or she goes, if it's a she, mainly a she, he goes and teaches the laity, or the pastor teaches the laity and disseminates information. But really, theology and community is one where every voice is important. Every voice matters. And now you find yourself in circles where grandma has something to say about God, even though she's got a third grade education, right? There's a whole like subfield of study in brown theology called abuelita theology, and Kat Armas is about to release a book in the next months, I believe, that is going to nail that thing. I'm excited about it. It's really the faith of our mothers and our grandmothers, right? How we learned about God around the dinner table with grandma, right?
Right.
And why is her voice not as valid as someone who went to seminary and got a doctorate, right?
Yeah.
So she's got a level, she's got insight on God that a textbook will never give you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
field worker has an insight on God and faith and trust and hope that a textbook or a lecture hall will never give you. So
yeah,
part of creating that shift is learning to listen to different voices and doing teología en conjunto, theology in community. And once you get to that, now you start talking about, what does the Bible have to say to people living in the hyphen, right?
Yeah.
A couple years ago, bro, just like you had your awakening, I had my awakening. I am a hyphenated human being.
Yeah.
Right? I am too Mexican to be American and too American to be Mexican.
Yeah.
And this entire time, I saw that as a disadvantage to me, right? There's a phrase in Spanish, ni de aquí, ni de allá, meaning I'm not from here nor there. Could it be that this is actually an advantage? I'm both of here and there, right? That hyphenated space is important. Now the question is, does the Bible have anything to say about it? Jesus chose Galilee. Jesus chose Galilee as not just his place of ministry, but where he would be raised. He was Jesus of Nazareth. And Galileans were too Gentile to be Jewish and too Jewish to be Gentile.
Wow.
Jesus is moving in hyphenated spaces, and he calls Galileans with accents who were not Jewish enough for Jerusalem to be disciples. Now tell me, does scripture have anything to say to my experience?
Absolutely.
So as we're wrestling with these topics in community, we see, the Bible, there's a hermeneutic, there's a lens, right? That where I don't have to check my culture at the door. I don't have to check my identity at the door. And by the way, no one can approach scripture without culture. So if I check mine at the door, I'm putting someone else's on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's usually the dominant cultures, right?
That's right.
I check my culture at the door. I put someone else's on, usually the dominant culture, and I completely miss what the scriptures have to say about my story. So I think if we begin by educating people, that's why I go back to your word truth, right? If we show the people that they are a part of the story, they're not just bystanders or observants of the story, they're a part of the story. I think now the link to the legacy and the justice and the identity of the Brown Church is more possible to make, and we can empower a whole generation, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, long-winded.
No, that's beautiful, man. It's powerful, and you get me fired up. So I'm hoping that our viewers are I know that they're enjoying this just the same. And so as we're getting closer to the end, I want to transition us a little bit. We're going to do just like a brief little appetizer taste talk about a little bit about this powerful book here called Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. Powerful, beautiful book. I'm going to post just a link there. I'll put it in the comments as well for those of you who are interested in ordering it. It's authored by Mark Charles and Dr. Soong Chan Ra. And so before we jump into the book, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of the co-authors, Dr. Ra, who you do a lot of work with in your PhD program. And so maybe just tell us a little bit about your PhD work and what you're focusing on and how it's been sort of working with Dr. Ra on that.
Actually, my degree is a Doctorate in Ministry. It's a DMin.
Okay, dope.
It's different.
I got you.
DMin is a more practical one. So it's a more practical one.
Yeah, got you.
I'm working on a DMin with Dr. Ra on urban ministry.
Gotcha.
Out of there's a program between North Park in Chicago and Fuller Seminary where I'm a student, and I'm doing the program with him, urban ministry.
Awesome. And so I guess under urban ministry is one of those interesting terms, right? Definitely in the Adventist Church. I think we'd also, did we bump into each other there was an urban mission and ministry conference, I think, on our campus, and which was, there were some actually really good parts of that. I enjoyed some of it. And Tim Wise spoke on the Sabbath in the Howard on campus. So I was like, hey, okay, that's a little different, but maybe you can just talk, and that could be its own podcast. But from your perspective and how you're looking at what urban ministry means, you're also, in the Southern California area, and you have a very particular lens on, what it means to do ministry there in an urban setting. I'm actually, and I don't want to necessarily put you out there, but I believe the conversation that we had was actually around the fact that we were having an urban mission and ministry conference in Berrien Springs and sort of the dissonance of that. And so maybe you can speak to some of that as far as like how important like immersion in ministry context is important to the way that you navigate the way that kind of ministry should be approached and that sort of a thing.
What I found fascinating is that we had it there. We had it in a rural area, right? We had an urban ministry conference.
Yeah.
It follows faithfully with a model that we've seen through generations, where urban ministry ends up being a mission where the good people from the suburbs or urban centers go into a Babylon setting to bring the news, right? To bring God to the cities. But that assumes that God is not at work in the city, right? God assumes that assumes that it is the suburban or the rural way of viewing God that is necessary for the city. But one of the most earth-shattering things for me is to be able to identify how God is already at work in the city. So even as I planted my church, I remember that was 5 years ago, so that wasn't that far back. I remember always thinking, well, we're going to bring God to that community. We're going to bring God to, so as if God were not ready yet, as if God needed me, right? Come in and bring the good news. Now, if I would do this all over again, I would rather than coming in and doing some sort of ecclesial gentrification in the community, I would take the time to listen to the gatekeepers, to that Hispanic church that has been around for 40 years, right? And has only 20 members, but they've been doing the work for 40 years. So that black has been around since the civil rights movement. And now they may not be as booming as they used to, but they've done the work and they've blessed. I would take a different posture and listen and try to perceive how God is already at move in the city. And it's beautiful. Once you slow down enough and you remove your own exceptionalism, you see that the city may not be as Babylon as you think it is, but God is actually at work. And the work of urban ministry is more about joining God in what God is doing rather than bringing something to where God is not. So that's been a shift for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's actually a really good transition into our quick convo on this book, Unsettling Truths. And so one of the things that's powerful is, and Dr. Ra has done this in a couple of different of his works in talking about the importance and the need for lament. I really believe that's one of the greatest contributions he's made to, to Christendom, I'd say, is just really reminding us of that deep need. Because, he and Charles both speak to, as you were just talking about, these concepts of exceptionalism and triumphalism. And we have this idea of a triumphalist American church, and how, for whatever reason, and I don't even know how Adventists have pulled into this with our prophetic understanding, but we have this viewpoint that in the end, the American nationalist version of Christianity wins and it has to be superior. And because of that, they're allowed to do these different things. And so I actually just have a quick excerpt from the book here that I want you to react to. It's just here from the intro where Dr. Ross talking about this need for lament. And he essentially says, ecclesiastical life that emerges from a triumphalist church results in the belief that God has ordained the American church agenda and therefore the actions of the American church, no matter how dysfunctional or destructive, to serve the purpose of God. Excessive celebration and exceptionalism and triumphalism results in the absence of lament for the American church. Human activity is elevated and God's activity is diminished. That part blew me away. Human activity is elevated and God's activity is diminished. And then real quick, he says here, the spiritual practice of lament could counteract the human tendency towards self-elevation. Lament serves as a crucial expression of worship because it is truth-telling before God. Lament recognizes that no matter what the circumstances, God is faithful and he delivers. We can rely upon God to be faithful to his word. But without lament, human effort and human success emerge as the driving force in the activity of the church. The message of a Messiah who suffered and died for humanity is lost in the avalanche of triumphalism. The practice of lament is necessary truth-telling, and that truth-telling part is so key. It's key to our work as a Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Campus Center. And so just talk about, if you could just react to that, and as you have sort of explored and embraced the spiritual practice of lament, right, and how it has helped you to sort of reshape. And you even talked about the fact that we all, I think, have a need to not just decolonize the theology that we're seeing, but the theology that we've seen, because we've all been brought up with it as well. And so how has that helped you to sort of navigate that process for yourself?
This is close to home because I have been personally annoyed and hurt this summer. Okay. And I want to be very cautious because this is very raw right now for me.
Please, no, don't be cautious. Go ahead.
Days after George Floyd was murdered, there was a group of Christians, of evangelicals, who invaded the space where he was killed, set up a stage, brought their instruments, and started a praise fest to, quote, change the narrative from protest to praise, right? So you had literally people on the counter corner, on the other side of the street, weeping and lamenting and processing and grieving from what just happened. And then on the other side, you had people with microphones and bullhorns singing songs of triumph and praise, completely tone deaf to the moment, right? And since then, that has become, and I want to be cautious here, but that has become a movement in North America that has, I think, traveled over 20 cities.
Wow.
Really just, quote, changing the narrative from this, protest and lament to no, we're gonna dance, and you see the dancing and you see the triumphalistic attitude towards the pain of humanity, right? Yeah. Completely dismissing the tears and the pain and the space that even Jesus, John 11, Jesus goes to Bethany, and even though he knows, and he told Martha, this is going to be for the glory of God, right? Yeah. Even before he resurrects, he takes the time and gives space for the grieving and the mourning and the lament. Yeah. We don't know how to do that. Yeah. How to do that. And we ignore the fact that the Bible is filled with lament, not just in the book of Lamentations, by the way. You look at Proverbs, you look at Daniel, you look at Revelation, you look at the Psalms, right? Lament is a tremendous part of our spirituality. And we don't know how to do that. We think we win, we're winners, and we're always coming on top, and everything we celebrate and everything and I preach those sermons, and to me, I lament now because I have misled people in that triumphalistic posture. And we're losing a big part of what it is to be a Christian, right? Because even Jesus himself lamented. So yeah, that's very raw and real for me right now. I'm seeing the movement, and it irks me because I think it misrepresents the heart of Christ.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. I mean, that's powerful, and you're speaking language that resonates with my heart as well. And so I appreciate you verbalizing that, because I don't know that I had the language for that yet, but it has been troubling to see. And I think it happens a lot in this conversation, particularly in the church around it's the same motivation that's behind when there's any conversation about racism, right? The instant pivot to what's the solution, right? That's the same thing. It's like, I get that. And it's like, well, no, you don't get it. But like, it's right there. You really don't. and we need some time to just sit and wallow in this and really understand and tell the truth about what it is.
Yeah.
And then allow us acknowledging that truth to invite the Spirit to break in and break through us to lead us towards what could be next. But that doesn't happen on our terms. And that's too uncomfortable for most people. Right.
I'm a problem solver. So
yeah.
As early as yesterday, last night, I was called out by someone. I posted something on social media. Someone called me out. They're like, hey, give us room. Give us room to grieve. Give us room to feel. Yeah, the solution, the love, all that is coming, but give us room. And we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to do that.
Yeah. It's a complex process. And so, man, this has been wonderful. We have about 5 more minutes left. And so for those who are watching, I'm really going to give you just like a microwavable teaser on what's in this book. And we're not going to do it justice, but I do think that it's important for you at the very least to understand, or at least be introduced to this concept of the doctrine of discovery. Because to be quite honest, before I started to see ads for this book, and it's only because I bought, some of Dr. Ra's previous books, so it sort of popped up in my email, I think one day. I'd never heard of the doctrine of discovery at all. It was never taught to me. I never came across it. And so I'll say real quick in layman's terms, and perhaps you can give some more color to it. The doctrine of discovery essentially is a set of legal principles that governed the European colonizing powers, particularly regarding the administration of indigenous land. And so the first sort of origin story around what became the doctrine of discovery is found in June 1452. Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull called Dum Diversis, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. His official decree there granted permission to King Alfonso V from Portugal, and quote here, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens. That was another word at the time for Muslims, and pagans. So basically anyone who's non-Christian or who they considered to be non-Christian, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all of them and other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed in the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, and it went on from there, all movable and immovable goods, anything held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to themselves and their successors the kingdoms and all therein, to convert them to his and their use and profit.
Right.
And so that kind of blew my mind. It was just like, whoa. And, so the Pope's just making this declaration that whatever land you come across, if it's inhabited by who we're calling these infidels, whatever they have there, including their own bodies, becomes your property to be done with and to be used however you see fit. And that's really being pointed out to by Charles and Dr. Ra as sort of the origin around what led to these different systems of oppression that came after. And so just maybe talk to us a little bit about why it's important for us to understand and know what the doctrine of discovery is, and how it can open our eyes to this unholy alliance with Christianity and these just overt, human rights violations that we've seen in our history.
Right. So essentially, the doctrine of discovery is a legal, theological, spiritual, religious justification for colonization, right? That's what it's a theological justification, a religious justification that has rather legal implications, right, for colonization. And we see that this ends up being the DNA of even our nation, right? Because that dehumanization, right, that informed even those who came to colonize, right, was now ingrained in the DNA of our documents, sacred documents. That's why women are not even in the sacred documents, and indigenous people are called savages, and Americans are people of African descent are deemed 3/5 of a person.
Yeah,
we need to identify that narrative, and that's a key word here. That narrative that begins with a theological justification for these invasions, that is a narrative that remains with us. So a lot in the work of justice, we try to hit systems, and systemic change is absolutely necessary. It is a goal, right? It is something that we need to achieve. But a lot of times what we end up doing is we try to attack systems without attacking the narrative.
Yeah.
We try to attack systems without attacking the imagination. The imagination gives birth to a narrative, to a system.
System, yeah.
For example, we go to the system of enslavement, right? We got rid of the system, but because the imagination was there from enslavement, we went to Jim Crow.
Yeah.
The system changed, but the imagination did not. So we got rid of Jim Crow. We got the civil rights movement. But now we have mass incarceration. Why? Because the imagination has not changed, only the systems. What we need to change is the imagination. We need to create a new narrative, and one that is not complicit with empire, but with the kingdom of God, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's beautiful. And one of the parts of the book, and it's really early on, one of the parts that really struck me, of course, Mark Charles, having indigenous heritage. He talked about an experience he had of coming across a Christopher Columbus Day parade,
right,
and seeing folks dressed up, to celebrate this holiday, and the fact that he just simply showed up one day and said to the people that were there that you can't discover land that's already inhabited.
Right.
You can't discover. That's called stealing. And so what was done was stealing, and our land was stolen. Stop saying that you discovered it. Stop celebrating this holiday and calling this person the man who discovered the new world. And so that's sort of the even fuller manifestation with Columbus of this lie and this narrative that we were all taught that Christopher Columbus discovered America. That's really the manifestation of the doctrine in many ways.
And if I can apply that to Adventism for a little bit, just to show how we've been twisted, right?
Yeah.
In our interpretation of Revelation, right? We see the sea in the book of Revelation is symbolic of peoples and nations and multitudes. Because Revelation says that about the sea, whenever the Revelation talks about the earth, right, and how the church went to the earth and the earth hid it and protected it, we assume that the earth is lands that are uninhabited, and we say that this second beast of Revelation that emerges out of the earth, which we have called North America historically as an Adventist church, out of uninhabited lands, right? We say it comes out of, so we are using the language of Doctrine of Discovery. We are saying that this beast emerges out of an uninhabited land, even though there was close to 100 million people, right? 1/5 of the world's population was in this territory, but yet we call it uninhabited. Why? Because the Doctrine of Discovery colored the way we viewed non-white European people groups.
Humans, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff, but it's important that we start to retell these stories. And so my encouragement again to all of our students or employees or whoever it is who came across this video due to social media algorithms, we're glad you're here. We want you to continue in this conversation. We want you to definitely get this powerful book, Unsettling Truths. Again, we'll put the link in the comments. We think that it will hopefully enlighten you the way that it's enlightened us. I mean, it's just such a powerful resource for me now. It's really in my mind when I'm thinking about explaining some of the very clear complicity that you're just talking about, not just with our church, but Christianity in general. It's hard to not start with the Doctrine of Discovery now, just in my thinking. It's really clear the connections to that origin story for sure. And it's good because we oftentimes in these discussions forget to affirm and acknowledge, first of all, the dignity of indigenous peoples, and acknowledge the story of how this land was stolen from them, and how they were massacred, by folks proclaiming this doctrine.
And it's one of those things that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You either become complicit or resistant, right?
That's it. I love that. I love that. You're complicit or resistant for sure. So our eyes have been opened, and so we're inviting you all to continue in this dialogue. Pastor Manny, my brother, man, this has been a pleasure. We could go on for much longer, but for those of you who stayed with us a little bit over time, we really appreciate you. If you are in need of co-curricular credit, there should be a link in the description box for this video. And we invite you and encourage you to join us again next week for our next installment of this co-curricular series. So again, Manny, appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. And everyone else, we'll see you all next time. God bless.